was only 30 years ago that I was sitting in the audience just like you are. And I distinctly remember feeling this incredibly strong desire to figure out how I could build my full life, not just my work life. Tom will remember, we had our oldest kid. I had my oldest kid. I should say my wife had our oldest child. The first day of finals of fall term, first year. And it was sort of a fascinating, one of those fascinating life's lessons. And I'll just start with this story. Because I showed up to the GSB. Everyone kind of remember first term? Kind of really stressful. You come in and you're like, oh my God, am I qualified? Look at all these smart people. I'm highly achievement and accomplish oriented. I need to do really, really well. So I'm going to freak out and stress out like everyone else. I don't want to fall behind. No, anyone had that experience? I showed up saying, you know what, I don't have to do well because I have an excuse. I have an excuse everyone can understand because we're about to have our first child right due date, the first term of finals. And so that term was one of the most interesting experiences of my life because while I saw a lot of my classmates freaking out, I would sort of go back to Escondido Village in the married students' housing, those funny people that had children, and I wasn't freaking out. And sure enough, Jack was born the Sunday of finals. I remember going to Marie McNichols. It was her first year teaching financial accounting, first year at the GSB, giving her a cigar during the prep session. But that first term of business school, I got 5 H's. And it wasn't because, and Tom will attest this, it was not because I was one of the smartest guys in the class. We had a lot of really smart people in our class. But it was because I didn't let myself fall into the narrative of the group, of the community, of the norms. I gave myself permission maybe to fail, and as a result, I succeeded. And so what I thought I'd just do this morning, this afternoon, is share a little bit of my experience and some lessons learned I've learned from others over the past 30 years. And I'm going to share different stories and anecdotes. There's no perfectly woven theme. And I would just say 2 things up front, and I'll say these when I come back at the end. Number 1, hindsight is really easy. And hindsight sounds really good. So I will tell you these things as though, it all weaves together perfectly and it's all simple and insightful. And I'll tell you, there wasn't one moment during the last 30 years where I was certain I was doing the right thing. There wasn't one moment when I was in the middle of it that it felt, oh, great, I got this all figured out. I still don't. And so I just want to say up front, it's going to sound good in hindsight, but actually living it is a different story. And then the second thing I'll tell you is life's hard. Life's hard. And once you accept that and see that's the beauty of it, in some ways, a lot of the other stuff gets easy. But let me start out. I'm going to put three simple themes. 1, a question, do you want to be world class? 2, your real life can be a competitive advantage. Your whole life can be a competitive advantage. And 3, do you want to win? And if so, it'll be hard. So 1, who here wants to be world class in your career? Let's say you're going to be a CEO or an investor or an entrepreneur. Who wants to be world class? Right? Who wants to have a family life and a set of friendships that are just outstanding? Yeah, me too. Early on in my career, I went to a talk by a guy named Jim Lair. And he talked about the concept of a business athlete. And he said, same question I just asked you. He said, you know what's so interesting? When you look at world-class athletes, they want to perform. They're on the playing field, and they want to perform at the highest levels. And for every hour they're on the playing field, they prepare 10 to 20 hours. And they invest in themselves. They don't assume they're going to be able to walk out, perform on a world-class stage with no preparation. They invest in their bodies, they invest in their minds, they invest in their skills, they invest in their weaknesses. They take preparing themselves really seriously, and they view that as a sign of strength, not of weakness. The narrative about business is, whether you're a CEO or an entrepreneur or a great investor, that, oh, we just work all the time. We don't really need to sleep or eat. Anyone that got a coach, or God help you, a therapist, that would be a sign of weakness. You never show your weakness. It's all strength. And that somehow we just assume we're just going to be able to jump on the playing field, a world-class playing field, just perform. And as he said this to me, I was a young consultant at Bain at the time, I thought, this makes a lot of sense. That actually the narrative of investing in yourself, investing in all parts of yourself, if you want to have a full life, made sense. And so the first set of things I would just share is taking care of yourself, invest in yourself. Now, part of it's easy, investing in your body. Eat decently, exercise, sleep. This is the one I keep relearning, the sleep thing. Like, you know, you get going and you go and you go and you say, oh, I'm grinding my way through, need to catch up on sleep. And I watch my productivity go zzz, 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 right? Jim Collins, who was a great professor here, has a wonderful framework for sleep. He says he tries to get 70 hours every 10 days. He can't, his life doesn't allow him to get 7 hours every night, but he's found his body equilibrium, and he works to get 70 hours every 10 days. And I found that to be a useful framework. So taking care of your body and having it be ready to perform. Your skills. This is perhaps the easiest piece, investing in your skills, right? Understanding what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses? How do you learn? How do you build your skills? I had a great learning early on at Bain about learning. I came out of business school with the narrative of how you learn is I was going to find someone in business who was going to mentor me. And I would be down at his or her knees like they'd be like the wise Buddha, conveying all the wisdom about how I could be successful. And I would be the student in front of a room there was a teacher. And I'd learned everything from this individual. And here's what I realized fairly early on, that actually no one person was going to be able to teach me everything. In fact, after a couple of years, you realize actually you're better than your mentor on some things. And I realized I had the same paradigm in life that I had in school, that like teacher, student, and that's not how it works. That learning, I realized if I wanted to learn, I could learn a little bit from a lot of people, not a lot from a few. And it changed my narrative about learning, where I feel like I can learn from each person I interact with. I can learn from each meeting. I don't just learn from my bosses, I learn from my peers. I learn from people I don't know. And here's the funny part. My brain, I've trained my brain to say, what can I learn? I was just having a wonderful conversation with Matt. Where's Matt? Who just introduced me. Backstage. I'm learning from him. And what I've found is when I meet someone, I look for their good qualities because I want to learn from them. And then people sense that I know that I'm looking for the good qualities, so they tend to open up and respond. And it increases the cycle of learning. As where most people kind of sit back, well, is this guy smart enough? You know. And so in building your skills, learn from everybody. You can learn from everybody, every example. You can learn what to do and not what to do. But learning. I've had coaches. I have had multiple coaches. I have a therapist, which I'll come to in a minute. I have a spiritual coach, both a Jesuit and a Buddhist. I've had work coaches, team building coaches. We have a couples therapist, Eileen and I do. It's like if you're a world-class athlete, you want to get coaching. That's a sign of strength, not weakness. And there's some great resources out there. Some great resources to build your skills and to share your life. The last area I'll say, if there's body and skills, the probably least talked about, maybe most important, is your mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And interestingly, there's a lot being written about this right now. A lot being, anyone here Golden State Warriors fans? Right? The 4 principles is mindfulness. They have 4 team principles all around principles of mindfulness. And the notion that performing at the highest levels is only possible when you have mental, emotional, and spiritual balance, each of us finding our own. And so as I said early on, I came out of business school, I was feeling incredibly stressed 2 years into my career at Bain. I came back and saw a professor here, Jerry Porras, who put me into contact with a woman named Jill Mellick, who's a therapist in Palo Alto. And I've seen Jill on and on for 30 years. She's an enormous friend and resource as I try to live my life. I've always feel like seeing a therapist is a sign of, strength, not weakness. I'm not afraid to say it. I don't think I could have processed my life alone. She's helped me process my life. Some priests, Jesuit priests I met here at Stanford, now a Buddhist, Jack Kornfield, have been an enormous source of support and help and inspirations at key times. Again, helping to develop all parts of myself. One of the things I learned in therapy was I had this massive fear of failure. I was feeling anxiety early on in my career at Bain. Even though I was technically doing well, I was just becoming racked with anxiety. And what I learned through a couple of years of therapy was actually I just had this massive fear of failure. And you know what? Parts of that still exist today. Parts of myself I'm continuously learning. It's like, oh, there's some familiar friends. There's version 14.0 of the same thing. But consciousness about who you are, consciousness about your proclivities, consciousness about your habits of your mind is such a gift, because then you can recognize it. Oh, there I go again. I'm feeling anxious. Or there I go again. I'm feeling insecure. At least my experience is I haven't been able to figure that out on my own. I go out and get help. The last kind of help I just share is building community, which is sort of what you're doing with each other. My wife and I have felt so blessed because we've built community around us where we share our lives with our community. And it starts in small ways. When I joined Bain out of business school, there was 8 of us that were part of that class. And we just agreed that every Friday morning, or the first Friday of every month, we would meet at the exact same restaurant for breakfast. And anyone that was in town would come, and we just kind of end up sharing our experience. And we did that over 2-3 years, and watched as each of us went through our ups and our downs. And then I'd start saying, God, I'm having such a difficult time with my boss. Or the travel is just wearing on me, I'm so tired. And someone else would say, oh yeah, I'm having that. Here's how I've been dealing with it. And we didn't solve each other's problems, but there was a sense of sharing and community. And we've had the same thing. We've had a couples group. My wife and I had a couples group. We met with 5 other couples for 15 years, once a month, sharing our lives through young childhood. And in the process, built a sense of community. And in a sense, that community was an investment in ourselves. So first point, if you want to be world class, you have to invest in yourself. And all this stuff that some people think is kind of fuzzy, I don't view it as fuzzy. I view it as the only way you can actually perform, and perform at the highest levels. Second theme, your whole life, your real life, can be a source of competitive advantage. Again, I learned this by accident. I was married when I showed up to the business school. In fact, I was married, and as I said earlier, we were going to have a kid. So we never had time to figure out personal life and professional life. We started early and it was all one life. And this notion of zero-sum framing, I actually hate the word work balance, life balance, because it suggests that it's work or life. It's my wife's career or my career. It's our children or our career. And so it immediately frames things as zero-sum, and then a term like life balance suggests there's an answer. And so we've always tried a very positive-sum mindset, which is not either or. It's how do we find the best of both, acknowledging we'll never get there, acknowledging there is no nirvana. One of the lessons I've learned through experience, accidental experience to some extent, around dealing with how you balance family, friends, career, is don't be afraid to ask, because creative solutions can evolve. First experience in that. So we had our child my first year of business school, and the same year my wife applied to Stanford Law School, and she got in. So we had the young baby. She's going to start law school. I'm going to do second year business school. She's not really into babysitting or nannies or anything, so we agree that the right thing to do is for me to go in and say to the dean, I need to either take the second year off or I need to go part-time. Because we were very anxious about it while she's starting law school. And so I went into Jerry Gould, who was the dean of student affairs at the time, and I said, Dean Gould, I need to either take the year off or go part-time. And she said, okay, that's fine. No, I first said I need to take the year off. And she said, well, you don't have to do that. At a minimum, you can go part-time. And I said, you can go part-time? I didn't know you could go part-time. Is there any policy in that? She said, no, but we can figure that out. You can go part-time. So then I said, okay, I can go part-time. How does that work? She said, why don't you just pick the classes you want to take, and the first week, just show up to those classes. And if you show up to 4 classes, great. And if after a week or 2 weeks you think you need to drop down to 3 or 2 or 1, you can. Sure enough, what happens, I show up to 4 classes, and after a couple weeks, it's kind of working. It's kind of working. I didn't need to go part-time. But I had to give myself permission to give it a try. I never would have tried it had, this is again the lesson of not being afraid to fail, giving yourself permission to do something that's counterintuitive. And I actually graduated on time, and it was a wonderful year. So again, don't assume, don't make assumptions you can or can't do something. A second example, 4 years later, Eileen finished Stanford Law School and had a clerkship for the federal judge in San Francisco. And she had to be in judges' chambers every morning at 7:30, every weekday of the year. At the time, I'm working at Bain. I am out of town all the time. We have 2 kids. And so my conclusion is I've got to quit Bain. So I walk into Tom Tierney, who was the guy running the San Francisco office of Bain, and I say, Tom, I got to quit. Eileen's she's going to have to be in judges' chambers every morning, which means I have to take my 2 kids to school every single morning this year, which means I cannot travel even once. So I just need to quit. And he's like, Donahoe, you idiot. He used to call me Donahoe. You don't need to quit. We'll put you on a local client. Now, at the time, Bain San Francisco had 0 local clients. It's like, Tom, we don't have any local clients if you haven't noticed. Like, we're all traveling a lot. He says, oh, we'll go get a local client. And so 2 weeks later, he takes me up to Fireman's Fund up in Novato. He says to the Fireman's Fund execs, here's the deal. I'm going to give you a free Bain case team led by this guy, Donahoe. And so it's a free team. Now, after 3 months, he's going to have to figure out to get you to pay Bain. But in the interim, it's free. By the way, he can't ever be here before 10:30 in the morning. See ya. That was the most productive year of my career. Turned out, developed a great relationship with the people at Fireman's Fund. They totally accepted I wasn't going to be there before 10:30 in the morning because I had to drop my kids off. And in fact, they learned to respect it and admire it. I was having a positive sum. Now, there were some Bain partners at the time that thought I was weak, that somehow, and some of my peers thought I was weak. You know, oh, he's dropping out of that up or out thing, or he's got to. I had no choice. It didn't bother me. I had to not listen to it. So not the whole world's going to tell you it's wonderful when it happens. But it worked. It worked. And it was, ironically, the most productive year of my career. Third example of don't make assumptions and be willing to ask for permission. So about 7 years ago, my wife is a big supporter of President Obama. She's been in law and human rights her whole career. So he appoints her to be ambassador to the Human Rights Council in Geneva. I'm CEO of eBay, and we have 2 kids still at home in high school. So we think, okay, how are we going to make this work? Now, we were a little bit further along in our lives, and so we talked about it with our kids. And our kids are like, are you freaking crazy, Mom? Do it. Go. We'll figure it out. We'll make it work. And our kids gave us permission. And we made it work. We made it work in a way that was some of the richest periods of our family history. Our older kids helped the younger kids. It was just wonderful. So your full life can be a competitive advantage in your work life if you're open-minded and you're willing to assume creative solutions may exist. Engage others. By the way, in your personal life, here's what I've learned in my personal life. My kids don't give a shit about my title. Me giving them orders or acting like a boss never works. I've learned listening from my relationships. I've learned empathy from my children. I've learned humility. I've learned how to multitask. I've learned the importance of just resilience and staying with it. By the way, those things really matter in work. It turns out, any of you want to be leaders? Those things actually are pretty important qualities of being a leader. And so, again, as you look forward, don't think about your personal life versus your professional life. I'm not saying it's easy and there's some nirvana, but understand learning in one can contribute to the other. Last thing, and then I'll open up to questions. Again, I'll go back to my earlier thing. How many of you want to win on a world-class stage? Not just perform, but to win. Okay. Turns out that's really hard. Just for a minute, I want you to think about, just for a minute, a period in your career where, when you look back, you're most proud. A period where you learned the most and grew the most in your professional capacities. Just think for a moment. Now think for a moment for a period in your personal lives that when you look back, you say, you know, I actually grew as a person. I look back with some pride and fondness on this period of time. For how many of you were those periods, either professionally or personally, where things are going really, really well? Okay. For how many of you were those periods when you were confronting adversity? Yeah, that's been my experience. Here's the bizarre thing. The things I'm most proud of, in hindsight, were really hard in the moment. They didn't feel good in the moment. And I realized I spent my life hoping I can set myself up so I really feel good. I want to feel great about my family. I want everything to be going well. I want to feel great about my career. I want everything to be going well. And yet, the periods that I look back on with pride and fondness, and the periods in which I know I grew the most, were the periods of adversity. And so I've had to learn how to not be afraid of adversity. Now, I cannot tell you I enjoy adversity. I can tell you that when I confront adversity now, when adversity is dealt to me professionally or personally. I don't like it. If you could give me an out, I'd take it. But I can tell myself, you know what? I'm learning. I'm growing. I'm doing something for which I will feel pride if I sustain and have the courage and commitment and resilience to get through it. And here's the interesting thing about performing on a world-class level. It's really hard. I'll use two sports analogies, so apologies to take global football, soccer, to those in the US. It's a wonderful, wonderful sport. I love the World Cup because almost every country on earth gets to have their national team. And a couple hundred teams start, and they start playing each other and start, right, whittling their way down. You start with, 150, 200 countries, and you get to the World Cup finals. The best two teams in the world on the pitch for 90 minutes. And these teams have great players, great strategies, are well prepared, and the games are ugly. Right? There are people getting dirt on their shins, shit on their uniforms. There's injuries, there's back and forth, and all the great strategies kind of get tossed out, and it's a battle. It's a battle, right? You know the final score of the last 4 World Cups? 1-0, 0-0, 2-1, and 1-0. The difference between winning and being the World Cup champ and not being the team no one ever remembers is 1 goal. It's not who, believe me, when you're in the middle of that game, it's not like, I'm just rocking dudes. Like, we're Brazil. We just pass it all over the place. It looks great. No, it's the opposite. It's who capitalizes on opportunities better. Germany, their best player, gets injured right in the beginning of the last World Cup, and the substitute scores the goal to win the game in overtime. Right? Anyone remember this? Anyone from France? Making one mistake or capitalizing one opportunity, the difference between winning and losing. And when you're in the middle of it, anyone watch the NBA Finals last year? You think it was fun to play in those games? No, it is a pitched battle. It is hard. It is overcoming adversity. It is committing to teamwork. It's having the resilience to bounce back. It's having faith that you can prevail in the end, but not knowing until the last minute about whether you will. That's what it's like. So instead of me wishing I was like in some cool place where everything's going all great, I realized, no, I want to play in a world-class stage, and I want to win, and it's going to be really hard, and I'm going to feel like I have a lot of adversity along the way, and I don't like adversity, but at least I know I'm growing. At least I know I'm doing something I'll be proud of. One last story. Gets back to my fear of failure. Is Matthew Theory in here? Yeah. Where are you, Matthew? This is a story about your dad. Matt's a second-year head. His dad was my first boss at Bain. One of my best friends, a hell of a boss, a tough boss, but a hell of a boss, and a great man. And early on in my Bain time, during that period where I'm having this fear of failure, I'm just racked with just anxiety. He's like, this is a baseball analogy, apologies to anyone that doesn't understand baseball, I think you'll get the gist of it. He's like, John, your problem's you're trying to bat 900. What do you mean? He's like, well, when you were in college, you got A's, which means you got 90% right. You were in business school, you got H's, which means you got 90% right. And so you're assuming that you've got to get 90% right to win. But now you've gone from the little leagues to the junior leagues to the college to now you're in pro. And guess what? The pitching is really good. Good fastballs, good curveballs. And you are so afraid to strike out because you don't want to bat, you're afraid you won't bat 900, that you're paralyzed. You don't want to get in the batter's box. He said, best I can tell, greatest hitter in baseball history, batted about 350. which means every 10 times he came up to bat, he could strike out 6, hit a couple of singles and an occasional double, and be the greatest hitter in baseball history. Kent says, you know what? Best I can tell, being a leading hitter in business is similar to in baseball. You got to bat 350 if you're going to play if you want to play on a world-class stage. So you know what? Instead of being afraid you can't bat 900, get in the batter's box and swing. And sometimes you're going to strike out. Sometimes you're going to strike out with the bases loaded and the stands full. But all you got to do is get a couple of singles, an occasional double, and maybe an occasional home run. Get in there and swing. And you know what? I've been a CEO of 2 companies, had 4 children, had a dual career, a lot of experiences. Batting 350 is actually not so bad. You can't bat 900 in life. So once I let go of trying to bat 900, once it was, whether it's coming to the GSB, my first term, or dealing with Carl Icahn at eBay, all you got to do is bat 350. And don't be afraid to get in there and swing. The power of resilience, the power of commitment to yourself and commitment to the journey is the thing that I think differentiates the people that win and those that don't. Last thing I'll say before I'll turn it over to your questions or whatever you want to talk about. It sounds so easy. It's so easy for me with hindsight to tell you these stories, these learnings, these blessings I've had. There was not one moment in the last 30 years where Eileen and I were certain we were doing the right thing as parents. There's not one moment where I've been certain about whether I'm being a good father or not. I can tell you I get a lot of credit now for the eBay turnaround. There was not one moment in the middle of that turnaround that we were certain we were going to make it. Right? And again, part of the goal, part of the purpose is just that commitment, that aspiration to build a full life, and the commitment and the resilience to pursue it. And then the faith that ultimately, it's a life worth living. So let me stop. I'd be happy to answer questions or talk about any topics you'd like to.
I just want to ask you, as you said, you have to sort of like practice it and then sort of keep reiterating and building that muscles. How do you retain that memory of resilience? Because I've passed that struggle and then I'm facing another one, anxiety about finding a job. Like, how do you sort of remind yourself it will be all right, and then you've passed through it, and then how do you even make that happen? I mean, you talk about spirituality and meditation and mindfulness. I would be happy to listen more on what granularity you have on that one. Thank you.
I'm looking for a job right now, so you and I are together. All right? So I'll tell you what I'm doing, and we can compare notes. Seriously. And you talk about one of the best things I've had the last year off. First time since I left the GSB, 30 years, first time I had more than 3 weeks off, I've taken the last year off. And one of the best things I did was I did a 10-day silent Buddhist retreat up at Spirit Rock. Great resource. Anyone want to, Spirit Rock, they have 1-day programs, 3-day programs. A guy named Jack Kornfield sort of founded the center. And I wasn't big into this beforehand, but the power of meditation has been a wonderful gift for me. And here's the image. Here's the image that I took out of that retreat. That Buddhism, the Dalai Lama would say, is not a religion. It's a science of the mind. So a left brain guy like me, that's interesting. And you start looking at brain sciences. And one of the interesting things in brain sciences, they're now documenting 2 things. One, your brain becomes more negative over time. Because they talk about the brain Bad experiences having a Velcro experience on your brain. Good experiences having a Teflon experience. That's bouncing off. And it's Darwinian. It's natural. You know, we step out, you step in front of a car, almost get hit by the car. Boom, your brain remembers that. Don't do that again. Your brain remembers it unconsciously and consciously. A beautiful sunset, your brain may or may not remember it. So over time, our brains actually magnify tough experiences, bad experiences, if left untended. But the second thing they're proving is that you can actually train your brain to counteract that. You can train your brain to be more, I'll say equanimity. Not even happier, but have equanimity. And the image they use that really helps me is they talked about how every person is deeply imbued at birth with what they call Buddha nature. And so Buddha nature is simply kindness, generosity, compassion, and love. And that they would say every sentient being, but every human being at birth is deeply imbued with those qualities. Whether you're born into ISIS or into Africa or into Atherton, right? Every human. And it's always there inside of us. It's like the blue sky. The blue sky is there every single day in history at every single point on Earth. There's blue sky up there. But what happens is clouds, right? Some days it's sunny blue skies, but a lot of days it's cloudy. Some periods around some places on Earth, there's a lot of clouds. Sometimes they're dark clouds, fog. You just think about how, and when it's foggy or cloudy, you forget the blue sky is above the clouds, right? Your mood gets impacted by that. And the clouds are nothing but air. And so what happens to us, and this happens to me, is I get clouds and I lose sight of my Buddha nature. Clouds can be habits of my mind, fear of failure. It can be my experiences. It can be distractions like digital life. Like you get so fragmented. And so I walk around at times like feeling like there are clouds covering over. I forget my Buddha nature. And when I forget my Buddha nature, that's when I get insecure. Or that's when I begin to get anxious. And what meditation's been for me is just simply waiting, saying, wait a minute, there's just some clouds. I gotta see through the clouds and see the blue sky, which is my Buddha nature. That kindness, generosity, compassion, and love are deeply inside me. And when I can connect with that, then you know what? I might figure out the job thing. I don't know how it'll happen. I don't know when, but. And so for me, the process of meditation is just one of just reconnecting with that. Turns out meditation's hard too. But, so I'll see you at the unemployment office. We can collect our checks together. All right, we'll go here. Okay, great. Yeah, you can hand the mics to whoever and then I don't have to pick.
Hi, I'm Tanhuan, MSX program. So there are more than just MBA students here.
Yeah.
I just want to understand from your perspective how important it is in life to win. Because you seem to talk about it a lot, but can't we afford to lose to promote the interests of others? I mean, in the context of your Buddhist philosophy and all. There seems to be an awful lot talked about winning, for oneself and maybe for your organization, but what about losing? Is that something that we need to embrace somehow, for the interests of others or the interests of society as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think it's how we define winning. For me, winning, I set goals for myself when I was at the GSB about I want to be not just a successful business person, but I want to develop a rich and fulfilling life to the best extent I can. And so I think each of us has to define what is our own version. It's our own intentionality, our own aspiration intentionality, and not always listen to what everyone else is saying about winning and losing. So the first thought that comes to mind is that each of us defining what is your aspiration for yourself in your life. What do you want to commit yourself with intentionality toward? It could be toward world peace. It could be toward helping people that have lost. I mean, it could be a lot of different things. And then, to your point, even in that game, losing's often the best lessons in life. The best lessons in life. So at least for me, I've always had that image of, I want to win, but win on the things I care about. And winning doesn't always mean that someone else loses or that other people recognize winning. Parenting's a wonderful example of this. Because parenting, you don't get the little scorecard along the way. And if you listen to it too much, you feel like you're losing a lot. But when your children get older, you look and you say, am I proud about who they have become? And that's winning. Does that make sense? It's great. It's a great question. So don't let others define. If you let others define winning and losing, they'll define it zero sum, not positive sum. And you're right. Society and our world right now is a little bit very zero sum oriented, and you could argue that we need a different definition of winning. Who's got the mic over? Great. Hi.
Hi. Have a question about your relationship with your wife. That's the type of relationship that at least I'd like to have with my partner. For many reasons, like one of the things, at any point in time, you two were a team and we're kind of like optimizing for both of you rather than just being like, oh, I'm at the GSB, I want to go to law school and so on. Could you share something? Could you share how you grew personally into that relationship? I'm sure it changes couple to couple, but at least for you, how did you make that happen? Like, how did you find that balance in a couple?
So the first thing I just want to talk to the men in here. I have one piece of advice to you, based on my experience. Find someone who is smarter than you, nicer, better looking, and a deeper person in personality, and marry her, because that's what I did. And I do think, in all seriousness, we met in college, and we talked. Her maiden name was Chamberlain, and mine was Donahoe, and we talked about Chamberhoe, a partnership. I'm totally serious. Chamberhoe, and then we had Chamberhoe 1.0, and a little later in our marriage, Chamberhoe 2.0. And when she went to Geneva, it was Chamberhoe 3.0. And in that was just sort of we had no answers, by the way, on any of this stuff. Again, in a dual career marriage family thing, it's even more than work stuff. It's really easy in hindsight, but it's really a journey. I'd say the quality I appreciate the most about my wife is that she demands that I become a better person. She actually doesn't really care about my career or my successes. She does care about the kind of person I am. And I've always felt her presence and her both expectation and encouragement and her role modeling on it. And I think she'd probably say the same. She'd say the same in response. And a marriage is a work of art. It's a piece of work. It's hard. It's hard. But if it's sort of like parenting, if you have a commitment to try to, okay, we're going to try to see this through. We're going to try to make this work. We feel really lucky. Community, the value of community around marriage has been huge for us. Other couples. We had this, I described this couples experience, couples group. We've had 5. And, we'd got, all right, it's the second Saturday of the month. We've got our Teams of Our Lady meeting. This is oh, God, we don't want to go to this meeting. We're so busy. We're so stressed. We have kids this, blah, blah, blah. God, I really don't want to be going to this. And we'd go. And people would start talking about what's going on in their lives. And time would just, And after 3 or 4 hours, you get in the car to go home and think, God, we don't have it as bad as they do. And I mean that in the best sense of the word, right? We were just sharing our experiences. And it was a little bit of perspective. Here we are, we're so obsessed and up, about ourselves and our own lives and our own situations and crises and this and that. And once you get in community, you realize, hey, wait a minute, that's what it's about. That's what it's about. So I will say she's also had a tougher, by the way, to the women in the group. We've both written about a little bit of this on some of Cheryl's lean-in stuff. She's had a tougher path, career path-wise. She was working at a law firm at the same time I was working at eBay, or Bain rather, early on. And there was definitely, in our generation, and I think still to this day, women have a tougher path. Deb Grunfeld, Deb's wonderful, you haven't had her class here. I used her at eBay. She's got this narrative that male leaders can be both smart and likable, and female leaders, the ones that are smart, are perceived not to be likable. Think Hillary Clinton. And ones that are likable must not be smart. And that it's not just men that project that on women, it's women that project that on women as well. And so Eileen was always one of the smart ones. And she used to get performance review feedback saying, you shouldn't be so direct. Shouldn't be so direct. And she was just cut through the clutter. Her boss used to go out drinking, get all the guys going out drinking afterwards. We had 2 kids, she didn't want to go out drinking. So I also think it's been a fascinating watching her go through our career paths. And I have a lot of admiration because she's had a tougher path than I have. I think that's changing a little bit, but it's still, there's a lot of way to go in our society on that. So thanks for the question. Next question. Who's got the mic?
I've got it.
All right.
So first, John, just thanks so much for coming here to speak with us today. I just wanted to pivot back to to your thoughts on mindfulness and meditation. And one of the things is that it's easier to see the blue sky, or at least notice the clouds, when you're either doing a 1-week silent meditation in Bhutan, or when you're sitting in your room by yourself. But that can be much harder when you're in the midst of a 12-hour day at the GSB or managing a multi-billion-dollar company. And I just wanted to know if you had any thoughts on how to better integrate those practices into the workplace. Either specific things that you've done or opportunities you see for better integrating those two.
Yeah, it's a hard. I can speak personally about how challenging that is. And here's the sort of strange thing about in my case. I could always make time to work out, but making time to meditate somehow felt harder. It's like, well, that's kind of stupid. I can work out my body, but not my brain. And then I began to doing a little bit. I'm old enough now, I've had knee surgeries, that basically working out means riding an exercycle. I know I ride the exercycle listening to meditation music. Try to do a little bit of both. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the only way I've known is trying to put habit in. Jack Kornfield had a wonderful little piece of advice, because he talks about having mindfulness just in little moments, not in like 20 minutes of, sitting like this, for periods on end, but he just in a moment of the day. And sorry if this offends anyone, but he says, every time you go to the bathroom, take a moment. A little trigger. Every time you wash your hands, every time you do whatever, just take a moment. And sometimes that works for me, and sometimes I'll go through 2, 3, 4 days. I'm now to the point where I begin to recognize the symptoms and when I don't do it. And then I feel resistance to doing it, which is like the best symptom that I need it. But having common practices and then trying to break it down into where it doesn't have to be gigantic swaths of time.
So we've reached the end of our Q&A time, unfortunately. We've got about 3 minutes left, and I know
Okay.
John had something he wanted to say to the
Yeah,
group.
I discovered, anyone here heard of John Gardner? John Gardner was one of the wisest men around. He was Secretary of HEW under President Kennedy, and then he was in Johnson's administration. And he was at the GSB when I got here. And he wrote a lot about personal renewal and the importance of personal renewal. And about 20 years ago, I found a paragraph that he wrote that just grabbed me. And it became my, I don't know if it's a personal mission statement, but it's a touchstone for me. And I literally have it laminated in my wallet. And I just want to close by reading it, because it's something that has, I read this probably once a month, I pull it out. Meaning is not something that you stumble across, like an answer to a riddle or the prize in a treasure hunt. Meaning is something you build into your life. You build it out of your own past, out of your affections and loyalties, out of the experience of humankind as it is passed on to you. You build it out of your own talent and understanding, out of the things you believe in, out of the things and people you love, out of the values for which you are willing to sacrifice something. The ingredients are all there. You are the only one who can put them together into that unique pattern that will be your life. Let it be a life that has dignity and meaning for you. If it does, then the particular balance of success or failure is of less account. So anyway, I'll end where I started. I honor and bless you and congratulate you for caring about building meaning into your lives, for this journey you're on and the commitment you have to making it a fulfilling and meaningful journey, and I wish you the very best of luck. Thank you.